The cabin lights glowed softly inside Flights 7 to 9, as it cruised through the calm night sky toward Dubai. Most passengers were relaxed. Some reading, some lost in their movies, and others drifting into sleep. In seat 17A, Satya, a quiet 22-year-old girl with large headphones covering her ears and a sketchbook resting on her lap. Her pencil moved gently across the page as she sketched the clouds she had seen during takeoff. She was the sort who blended into the background, a silent presence that few noticed. But behind her calm eyes lived a mind that observed everything. A mind trained far more than anyone around her knew. The flight attendants walked up and down the aisle, serving drinks and smiling at passengers. Occasionally, one of them glanced at Aya because she always refused conversation with a polite nod. She preferred the comfort of silence over small talk. Her father, once a respected airline captain, had taught her that quiet observation could be a pilot's greatest strength. She had spent countless nights watching and practice on the home simulator, absorbing every move, memorizing every switch, every sound, and every emergency procedure. Up in the cockpit, Captain Harris and First Officer Malik monitored their instruments with the usual routine, confident. The flight was smooth, the weather clear, and the aircraft's engines hummed with steady rhythm. The autopilot handled most of the workload, leaving them to light conversation about past flights, families, and upcoming vacation. Nothing hinted at danger. Nothing warned them that within minutes they would face a crisis no training manual fully prepared them for. At exactly 11:42 p.m., a deep metallic bang tore through the plane structure. The cabin shook violently, jolting passengers away. Drinks spilled, overhead bins rattled, and frightened voices filled the once peaceful silence. Isla's pencil rolled off her tray as she grabbed the armrest. Her heart thudded, but her expression remained composed, almost instinctively, assessing the vibration, the direction of the sound, the change in engine rhythm. In the cockpit, alarm bells erupted. The right engine's readings dropped to zero. Flames flickered outside the window, and smoke began trailing behind the aircraft. Captain Harris immediately disconnected the autopilot and gripped the controls. Malik radioed the nearest air traffic center, his voice tense, but controlled. They attempted an engine shutdown procedure to isolate the fire, following the emergency checklist with practiced precision, but before they could stabilize the situation, the aircraft lurched again. This time, the left engine sputtered, coughed violently, and then went silent. Every light on the panel turned red. The hum of the engines, something passengers took for granted, vanished completely. A sudden, terrifying quiet filled the massive aircraft as it began gliding helplessly through the night. In the cabin, oxygen masks dropped with a loud snap. Screams erupted. Babies cried. People clutched each other in panic. Aya grabbed her mask, secured it, and looked around with sharp, analytical eyes. She recognized the pattern. Dual engine failure, extremely rare, almost impossible, but not unwinnable. She had practiced this scenario dozens of times in her father's simulator. Her mind raced through the steps, calculating altitude, distance, glide ratio, and time. Captain Harris tried to make an announcement, but his voice broke slightly as he lifted the intercom. Still, he knew he had to stay calm for the passengers. His tone was steady, but everyone could hear the urgency beneath it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing technical difficulties. If there is any licensed or trained pilot on board, please notify the crew immediately. The cabin went absolutely still. People looked around, hoping, praying for someone to stand up, but no one did. Most passengers weren't understanding the gravity. Others were frozen with fear. Isla's fingers tightened around her sketchbook. She hadn't flown a real plane before. Only simulators, only practice, but practice shaped instinct. And instinct was all that mattered in a crisis. She inhaled deeply. She reminded herself of her father's words. A pilot is defined not by her hours, but by her decisions. She unbuckled her seatbelt slowly. Her legs felt strangely weightless as she stood up. The people around her stared, confusion in their eyes, but she ignored them. She moved aisle by aisle with quiet determination, her heart pounding louder than the alarm she remembered from her simulator session. When she reached the front, the flight attendants stopped her, panic in their expressions. One asked, trembling, "Do you need something?" Aya spoke softly but firmly. "I can help. I know the aircraft systems." The attendants looked at each other uncertainly. She was young, silent, and seemed like any ordinary girl, but something in her voice, steady, confident, unwavering, made them step aside. The cockpit door opened, revealing flashing warnings, frantic communication attempts, and two pilots fighting for control of a powerless aircraft. Captain Harris turned his head toward the unexpected visitor. Sweat covered his forehead, but his eyes flicked with a desperate question. "Are you a pilot?" Isla met his gaze, her voice calm despite the storm inside her. "I trained on My father was a cap. I know this plane." Silence hung for 2 seconds. Then the captain nodded once. Sit down. Aya slid into the right seat, her hands trembling for just a moment before her training instincts took over. The cockpit was a battlefield of warning sounds and flashing indicators. Smoke alarms, engine fail lights, hydraulic cautions, everything screamed at once. Captain Harris and First Officer Malik were doing their best. But with both engines out and the plane rapidly losing altitude, even their experience had limits. Ayla took a deep breath, her fingers hovering over the familiar controls she had studied so many nights in her father's simulator. The captain glanced at her. Tell me what you know. Aya steadied her voice. We need to attempt a dual-engine restart, but we have to stabilize our glide first. What's our altitude? Mal answered quickly. We're at 26,000 feet and dropping. Aya nodded. We have a few minutes. Let's use them. She reached out and adjusted the pitch slightly, feeling the yoke respond smoothly. Despite the sudden quiet of the powerless aircraft outside the cockpit windows, the night sky stretched endlessly, stars glittering over a vast darkness. Beneath them lay miles of barren desert, with no engine noise. The silence felt far louder than any alarm. Aya began scanning the systems with rapid precision. Fuel flow, cut off. Ignition off. APU online. Trying, Malik muttered, flipping switches. It's slow. It always is at this altitude, she replied, her tone surprisingly firm. Keep it going. Captain Harris watched her hands. They were steady. Not the hands of someone panicking, but of someone who had been waiting her whole life for a moment to prove something, even if she never expected it to come in such a terrifying way. Ayla closed her eyes for half a second, recalling the exact steps from the simulator. Okay, again. Auto relight sequence. Crossbleed check. Fuel pumps. Mel complied, impressed by how confidently she spoke. The cockpit clung to hope. As the sequence ran, they waited for the engine indicators to show any sign of recovery. Nothing happened. Ayla bit her lip, refusing to let fear seep through again. The process repeated in tense silence. Still, nothing. The captain shook his head. We're losing altitude too fast. We may not have time. Aya's eyes darted to the altar. 23,000 feet and dropping. She refused to give up. There's always time until we hit the ground again. Her determination pushed them to try a third restart, but once more the engines failed to untie, exhaled slowly. She knew what that meant. Chances were high the engines had suffered catastrophic damage, something no amount of restarting would fix. Captain Harris asked quietly, "What now?" Ayla lifted her head and pointed at the navigation display. "We glide and we head." A faint narrow line appeared on the terrain map, barely visible but unmistakable. An abandoned military air strip, old, short, forgotten. Malik stared. That strip isn't active. It hasn't been used in years. It's still flat, Aya said, still landed. And it's the only surface long enough within glide range. The captain let out a shaky breath. How do you know these coordinates? Aya hesitated, then answered softly. My father flew over this region dozens of times. He used that strip as a reference point during training conversations. I memorized everything. Captain Harris exchanged a glance with Malik. They didn't have many choices left. AA was young, yes, but she was speaking like someone who understood the aircraft better than either of them in this moment. Her mind was clear, her plans solid. All right, the captain said. Set course for the strip. Ayla's fingers flew over the controls, adjusting glide path, recalculating descent rate, and correcting heading. The aircraft shifted slightly, angling toward the distant makeshift runway. In the cabin behind them, flight attendants fought to calm terrified passenger. Some prayed, some cried, others clutched their loved ones tightly. But none of them knew that the quiet girl who had walked forward was now guiding their fate. Aya leaned closer to the windows, scanning the darkness. We need to maintain speed. No engine means no thrust, so we trade altitude for distance. Smooth inputs, no sudden movements. You've done this before, the captain observed softly. In simulations, Aya answered, never like this. Malik attempted to radio for assistance again, but the signal crackled useless. We're out of range. No one can hear us. Aya didn't react. She stayed focused, every muscle tuned to the delicate balance of keeping the plane from Reminder that the edge between control and disaster was razor thin. The aircraft glided in eerie silence. Aya pressed a button and spoke into the intercom. Passengers of Flight 729, this is Aya. We are attempting an emergency landing. Please stay calm and remain seated. Her voice spread through the cabin like a warm blanket. Soft, steady, unexpectedly reassuring. Several passengers felt a strange confidence return. Even the cabin crew exchanged looks of relief. Ayla continued adjusting the yoke, calculating the remaining altitude. We're going to make it, she whispered to herself, as much to convince her own racing heart as to reassure the pilots beside her. The captain watched her for a long moment. In his eyes, you were made for the cockpit, he murmured. But Ayla didn't respond. She kept her eyes locked on the shrinking distance to the only chance they had left. A strip of forgotten concrete waiting in the desert darkness, and a landing none of them would ever forget. The abandoned airstrip was still miles away, little more than a faint outline on the navigation display, but Aya could already feel the weight of every second slipping away. The aircraft continued descending in a silent glide, the night sky stretching endlessly around them. Below, the vast Arabian desert lay like a dark ocean, giving no mercy, no landmarks, nothing to break the fall if their approach failed. Aya tightened her grip on the yoke, keeping her breathing steady. Calm was a pilot's weapon, and she clung to it now more than ever. Captain Harris leaned forward, squinting into the darkness. "Can you even see the runway?" "Not yet," Aya replied, "but it's there. We just have to trust the instruments." Malik tapped the screen nervously. "We are losing altitude faster than predicted. We need to be perfect on this glide." Aya nodded. "Then we will be—" The stall warning chirped again. Short, sharp, threatening. Aya nudged the nose down slightly, trading a little more altitude for crucial speed. The passengers would feel the gentle dip, but she couldn't worry about that now. Speed meant control. Control meant survival. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Calm and sure. An airplane without engines is still a bird. Aya, fly the wings, not the fear. In the cabin, the passengers were gripped by a tense, suffocating quiet. Some prayed. Some sobbed quietly. Others kept staring at the dark windows, hoping for lights, for signs of civilization, for anything. Flight attendants moved between rows, offering reassurance, though their own hands shook. None of them could imagine that the girl who barely spoke during boarding was now in the cockpit, fighting for all their lives. Back in the cockpit, Aya scanned the ground radar again. "We'll pass over a ridge in 3 minutes. After that, the runway should be visible if the moonlight holds." Captain Harris glanced at her, his respect deepening with every moment. "How are you so calm?" Aya did not look away from the controls because fear wastes time, and right now time is fuel we don't have. Malik gave a shaky laugh. "You talk like someone who's been flying for years." "I've been learning all my life," she whispered. The plane began to shake lightly, the turbulent air rising from the warm desert below. Without engine power, even small gusts felt stronger, threatening to tilt their delicate glide. Aya held the yoke with smooth, precise movements, resisting each unwanted drift. Attitude stable, she murmured to herself, watching the artificial horizon glide sloped steady. "We're going to make this." Minutes stretched painfully, each one carved with urgency. Finally, the ridge approached, dark, jagged, rising beneath them like a massive shadow. Adjusted the pitch once more, gliding them gracefully over it with just enough clearance to avoid catastrophe. As the plane crossed the ridge, the desert floor widened into a flatter expanse, and there, faint but undeniably present, was a straight line, dusty, cracked but real. "I see it," Ala said, a fire igniting in her voice. "Runway ahead." Mal gleaned closer. "It's so short." "It's enough," Isla responded. "It has to be." Captain Harris exhaled deeply. "Aya, you take the landing." Her heart skipped. This was no simulator, no safe reset button. But she didn't doubt herself. She couldn't. Too many lives waited behind her. "Okay," she whispered. She lowered the nose slightly to align perfectly with the narrow strip. With no engines, she had to maintain the ideal approach angle. Too high, and they'd overshoot. Too low, and they'd hit the sand before reaching the concrete. The stall warning chirped again. Aya ignored the fear it injected. "Not yet. Hold it," she murmured. She extended the landing gear manually. The wheels thudded into place with a reassuring clunk, though the vibration rattled through her bones. In the cabin, passengers felt the shift as the plane angled downward. Some held hands, whispering final prayers. Others sat rigid, eyes squeezed. The silence inside was almost unbearable. Aya took a deep breath, her eyes locked on the runway. Speed, stable, altitude, low, perfect glide. Malik's voice cracked slightly. "This is going to be tight." Aya didn't look at him. "All landings are tight. This one is just honest about it." The ground rushed toward them. Sand dunes blurred past the windows. The runway filled the entire view. "Now closer, closer." "Seconds," Aya whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Come on, Bert, fly me home." She eased back slightly on the yoke. The plane leveled. The stall warning screamed. The altitude screamed. Everything screamed. But Ayla stayed steady. "Hold, hold," she whispered. Then the wheels hit the concrete with a violent bone-rattling impact. The plane bounced back into the air. Gasps exploded from the cabin. Instruments jumped. Aya clenched her jaw and forced the nose down gent. "Come on, settle." The aircraft came down again. Harder but controlled this time. Tires screeched. Sparks flew. The runway rushed beneath them in a blur. The captain grabbed the brakes. Malik assisted with manual flight. Aya focused only on keeping them centered as the dust cloud rose around them. "We're not stopping," Malik shouted. Aya pressed her feet harder on the rudder pedals. "We will." The end of the runway approached like a dark wall. "Rake," the captain yelled. Aya shouted back, every muscle in her legs burning. The plane slowed faster, faster, until finally the scream of the wheels softened. Then, after a final desperate stretch, the massive aircraft slid to a stop just meters before the edge. Silence swallowed the cockpit. Aya's hands finally loosened from the controls. "We made it," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Captain Harris looked at her, stunned. No, you made it. And for the first time that night, A allowed herself to believe the aircraft sat still on the cracked, dust-covered end of the abandoned runway, its metal frame trembling slightly from the intense landing it had just survived. Inside, the silence felt unreal. No engine noise, no alarms, no screaming. Only the heavy breaths of hundreds of people who had just escaped the edge of death. Aya remained in the co-pilot seat, her hands still resting on the controls, knuckles white, heart thundering in her chest. She had not yet allowed herself to move. Her mind was still catching up with what she had done. Captain Harris slowly removed his headset, his eyes fixed on the girl beside him. Molly leaned back, chest rising and falling in quick breaths. For a few seconds, none of them spoke. They were suspended between shock and relief, unable to process the magnitude of what they had just lived through. Then, very softly, Captain Harris whispered, "Ayla, you just saved an entire aircraft." Aya let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her throat tightened, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of the moment. "We did it," she said quietly. "We all did it." But the captain shook his head. "No, without you, we would have hit the desert. No question." Behind them, the first sound of life rippled through the cabin's soft cries, choked laughter, and the muted voices of people realizing they were still alive. The passengers began unbuckling shakily, some standing, some hugging each other. A baby cried somewhere in the rear, but this time it was a cry of life, not fear. A flight attendant opened the cockpit door, her eyes glistening with tears. "Captain, passengers want to know if they can clap." Her voice cracked. "They want to clap for her." Ayla blinked. "Saint for me." The captain smiled for the first time since the crisis. "Bezin, you deserve every bit of it." As Aya stepped out of the cockpit, hundreds of eyes turned toward her. For a moment, she froze. These same passengers had barely noticed her boarding quietly hours earlier. Now, every single one of them stared at her with awe, gratitude, and disbelief. A quiet, shy girl who rarely spoke. Now the reason they were all breathing. Then it happened. The entire cabin erupted into applause. Loud, emotional, thunderous applause. Some passengers cried openly. Others stood and clapped harder, calling out, "Thank you, and you saved us, and you're a hero." Aya stood still, overwhelmed. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. She hugged her arms to her chest, tears filling her eye. She had done what she knew she had to do. Nothing more. She never expected praise, much less a standing ovation from nearly 200 people. A woman approached her first, holding her two children close. "You saved my babies," she whispered, her voice shaking. "How can I ever thank you?" Aya gently touched her arm. "Just take care of them," she said softly. One by one, people approached, some asking to shake her hand, others simply touching her shoulder in gratitude. Elderly passengers blessed her. Young men bowed their heads in respect. Mothers wept with relief. The cabin crew, shaken but deeply thankful, hugged her tightly. Outside the desert, night wrapped around the plane, cool and vast, sea,